So yeah, SQL injection will be talking about how to detect SQL injection using burp and how to automate this and so on. So basically SQL injection are categorized into multiple types. One is error based, one is blind, and so on. So here we'll talk about error based SQL injections. And SQL injections are basically caused by an application not having input validation in the server side and it accepts any SQL query as a proper input, right? So let me switch on my burp. So my burp is running. Here I enter character 1 or C2. So yeah, here we can see there is a post request which has been sent to the server on this endpoint XVWA, SQLi, and the parameters, two of them are being sent, item and search. So to test for SQL injection and that to error-based SQL injections, the first step in exploiting SQL injection is give a special character which the SQL DB recognizes and see if you're getting an error or if the application is throwing a 200 or it's becoming unresponsive and so on. Basically, let's just inject a quote in end of the search parameter here and try to send it to the server. So here we can see there is a SQL error message. It says there is a error in the SQL syntax on MySQL server version and so on. So this is basically a litmus test to understand if there is a SQL injection, if it is potentially can be exploited and so on. And here, after this we have determined that there is an SQL injection. We can give more queries like 1 or 1 equal to 1 1 and see how the server is responding. You can give something like this, and we have a error message and so on. So yeah, and instead of or, you can also give and or union with the syntax and see how the server is responding and what is the error message you're getting. So this is a time consuming process, and if you are working on an engagement which needs to be delivered on some particular day, you cannot expect the whole SQL injection to be done manually by yourself. That's why we have a tool called SQL Map, which automatically detects and exploits SQL injection, which has multiple other functionalities also, like you can run a command, you can upload a shell, you can dump the database, you can create a user, and multiple other things. So we are just going to showcase how you can use an SQL map to detect and exploit SQL injection. So if it is a GET request, so this is a POST request, right? So if it's a GET request, you just need to right click, copy as a URL, which is, yeah, copy URL, and you get the GET URL, and the ID will be in the URL, which the SQL map will recognize and it will exploit. But this is little different because this is a POST request, and there is a body with a couple of parameters, and there are multiple headers. So how do you run this into SQL map? So you just copy the whole data. You just copy the whole data into a text file, save it in your desktop, and run SQL map -r post.text -v.
It'll be SQL1.text, right? If I'm not.
Yeah, basically this SQL1.text is gonna start scanning the whole database from scratch, and it will take time. So we have already created a SQL post.text, which has, you can see, which is the same, which is the localhost XVWA SQL injection with the parameters item1 and search.
Okay, so just for people, some of you asked, what is the application which we are using? So we're using an application called XVWA. It's an open source web application tool which you can also download it in your laptop. In this case, we use the Dockerized version. which was pretty easy for us to host it, and that has a lot of exercises which you can do. So we are taking the error-based SQL injection uh, for this demo. Yeah.
Yeah, so basically we can see here that SQL map minus R is the text file which we need to include, and minus V is verbose. So basically it sent a couple of parameters. So since it is in verbose mode, we can see what is the payload exactly here. So it sent a payload called item equal to 1, and it made a SQL query, right? So I'm just highlighting that. It made a SQL query, and it determined that the database which is used in the backend is actually MySQL. So not only you can determine the database, but you can also determine what are all the tables inside it or columns present. You can also, for example, check what is a host name. Yeah, you just run SQL map with flag host name. So it is going to fetch the server's host name, which is which is this. And here, since it is in verbose mode, we again can see what is the exact query which SQL map sent, so that we can try to reproduce it ourselves using Burp, or to tell the developers on how to exploit this or how to reproduce this vulnerability. We can use this as well. So that's the first issue, SQL injections.
So Nishant, I actually have a question from one of our viewers, and so the question is basically, uh, most of these queries which you are running in the SQL map would be blocked by WAF, right? Web application firewalls, which are there. So how can you bypass this WAF using SQL map or any other things? Like I still remember that we did an assessment on top of where there was an AWS WAF which they were using. So what did you exactly do to bypass those WAF?
Yeah. So basically, WAFs are just defense in depth, and SQL injection or any type of API level security threat should be patched in the API level instead of putting a WAF or adding additional level of protection. So why I say this is because, as you were mentioning, one of the assessments which we were doing, we had reported SQL injection to one of our clients, and what they did is they didn't actually patch the SQL injection by using parameterized queries, but they actually bought a AWS WAF. They were already using AWS EC2, so basically they bought WAF solutions as well, and they configured the WAF to block our SQL request. So when we rescan to check if it is a SQL injection is still possible or if they have fixed it or not, initially we were not actually getting any response from the server. But so basically, I'll just show you. So here, so say this is my request. This is the request, and this is, consider this is the server which has a WAF which blocks certain keywords like and. For example, consider it blocks and, or it blocks or union, or whatever. So initially, what we tried doing is, again, we tried to reproduce by one and one equal to one. We sent it to the server. It just threw a 200 and it didn't show any SQL error message. But when we did something like this, which is not exactly a capitalized and, which is a smaller case A, capital N, and capital D, this will actually bypass the WAF, because the WAF's configuration is to block and, which is in caps, or block and, which is in small. So if it is capital A and D or small a and D, that will be automatically blocked by the WAF. But since this does not match the signature of the WAF, this will get bypassed. So we figured out that, okay, they are using a WAF and we need to go about bypassing this. Again, doing this from scratch using just a proxy to fetch the databases, to fetch the usernames, it's extremely tedious. So we were actually going through SQL Maps documentation, and we found something really cool in SQL Map called tamper scripts. So yeah, so basically we found Yeah, we found something called tamper scripts. So basically, what tamper scripts do is they have bypasses for WAF, or they have a custom. Say, for example, I'll give you one more scenario. Say your whole post body is being actually sent in base64. So how would you test that? You don't have to decode it every time, inject SQL payload, encode it, send it to the server, decode it. That's very tedious, right? So SQL map has a tamper script which will automatically use base64. It will encode it and give you the results. So here in the scenario where I was talking about earlier, we use this. We used a couple of tamper scripts from the mentioned ones, which is between.py and
Yeah, so I think it would be like random case.
yeah, random case, exactly. So basically, we can see example, right? So select will be changed into SC, small l, small e, capital C, T. So these are very helpful in assessments. If that too, if the application is using a WAF. Also here we can see there is a bypass for blue code, which is a WAF solution. There are multiple bypasses, multiple tools which you can integrate, like the one I said for base64. And if it is blocking spaces and comments, how do you go about bypassing that? We just need to see how what are all the tamper scripts which are provided by SQL map, and I'm sure one of those tamper scripts should be useful to mitigate to come overcome the WAF or whatever is being blocking your request and not being fixed.
So one thing which you can do also is basically write your own tamper script. So you can so all of these scripts are written where you can basically go ahead and view what the script basically does, and you can use your own tamper scripts, like use your own way of bypassing it. But the first thing is figuring out if you are using some kind of WAF, is there a bypass to those kind of WAF? And then figuring out whether you can do a tamper script on top of that. Now we have a lot of questions over here, which is talking about the first thing which I got is this is a very basic thing for a pen tester, right? An example of an advanced exploitation in case of WAF scenarios. But for that, we need to host a WAF to show a live demo, which is not possible in a webinar, which covers a whole lot of other things, not only SQL injection, but what we will try to do is give you a direction where you can figure out how to go ahead with. We have our own group. We have a LinkedIn group itself where you can, if you want to dig down, deep into some, if you have questions regarding how have we ever experienced a WAF where we had bypassed, or if you need some help with scripts, we're happy to help you there in the group. But for the sake of time, we are going to just show this uh, tamper scripts which is there, and this is how you can do it. You can write your own tamper scripts and go